So the Coast Guard received the initial notification of a potential man overboard from the Carnival Valor yesterday afternoon around 2:30 p.m. The initial report came as the vessel was heading outbound the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. So the individual was a 28-year-old male, last seen on Wednesday evening at 11 p.m. He was reported unaccounted for by his sister the next morning at 10:45. So we have a fairly significant time gap between the time he was last seen to when he was reported as unaccounted for. So when we got the report, the Coast Guard immediately entered the distress phase. We went ahead and issued a broadcast, which is a safety net message and an urgent marine information broadcast. What that does is it essentially notifies all the mariners operating in the Gulf of Mexico of a potential man in the water and to keep a sharp lookout and assist if available. In addition, we launched a Coast Guard helicopter out of New Orleans, a small boat out of Station Venice, Louisiana, and a fixed-wing aircraft from ATC Mobile. So from the time that the individual was last seen to the vessel reporting it, they had transited about 200 miles into the Gulf of Mexico. And when we look to kind of equate that into a reasonable search area, we were over 7,000 square nautical miles, which is roughly the size of Massachusetts. So we understood that, time was certainly of the essence. We did our best to immediately marshal all resources to get him on scene and start to work through that search and rescue process.
So talk to me about this man. So do we know, did he jump? Did he fall? How is he getting into the water?
Yeah, so the investigation is still ongoing. We have not spoken with him this morning, and Coast Guard investigators who will be the lead for the investigation are currently working through that process. About 8 p.m. yesterday evening, the motor vessel Christen reported seeing a person in the water to the Coast Guard. We diverted our Coast Guard helicopter, which is really only about 6 miles away from that point. They were able to arrive on scene, lower the rescue swimmer, and hoist the 28-year-old male on board. He was able to confirm his identity and his name, and that he was, in fact, the individual who had fallen off. He appeared to be suffering from mild hypothermia, shock, dehydration, but his condition overall appeared stable.
And how is he doing today?
So the helicopter rendezvoused up with emergency medical services, landside, and they transported him to a higher level of care. Based on the information provided to me currently, he's in stable condition.
Well, that is good to hear. We want to talk to you all about, how many times does this happen? Is this normal that you all are going out and doing these types of search and rescue for, folks that somehow are landing in the water off of a cruise ship? How often do you see that?
Sure. So I think one of our major statutory missions, and the reason that I joined the Coast Guard, is for search and rescue. I think it's one of the premier operations that we offer the American people. So while I can't tell you definitively how often a person in the water occurs, we do have a fairly robust search and rescue posture here out of the greater Louisiana area, especially in the Gulf Coast. With this particular circumstance, there was a lot of challenges and complexities. The time delay, the distance offshore, the huge search area. And I think it really kind of came down to the close partnerships we have with the maritime community in the Gulf of Mexico. And then honestly, the individual's will to live, to be in the water for what we could assume is 15 plus hours with no life jacket. It's just simply incredible.
That was going to be my other question was, that's quite some time in the water. Any idea as to how he survived? I mean, you said no life jacket. Was he paddling the whole time? I mean, can you give me any insight into that?
Yeah, I think those are completely fair questions. And hopefully as we kind of do the survivor debrief and talk with him, we can determine how he was able to stay above the waterline. When the helicopter did come overhead, they did observe him kind of going subsurface intermittently. So it seemed like, a high level of fatigue at this point, cold, and kind of out in the elements for an extended period of time. I will say that one of the highlights of my Coast Guard career is calling the family who was on board the Carnival Valor to letting them know that their son is alive and en route to additional medical care. So that's a Coast Guard memory I'll have forever.
And what was their response when you gave them that news?
Exuberant, tears, shouting, truly just a miracle, especially on a holiday like Thanksgiving, where it's predominantly around family and spending time together. So just ecstatic.
That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Um, all right. Do you have any idea? I know, and you said you can't really say how often you do search and rescue, but specifically for cruise ships, I mean, is this rare or normal to happen? I mean, I feel like I don't hear about this a lot.
Yeah, and that's honestly somewhat I have to kind of divert you back to Carnival to kind of give you their statistics. I know from a search and rescue standpoint, it's not been something that I've personally been involved with on a consistent basis. But as far as the frequency and how often it kind of happens, I'd have to defer you back to the company.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Were there any other details that we didn't talk about that you want to mention?
No, I think the only other thing I'd like to say is it was certainly a team effort. The Coast Guard, men and women are exceptional. They train day in, day out for this type of operation. And there was no complacency. They went out there expecting to save a life, and that's exactly what they did.
And on a holiday,
And on
you
a
all
holiday.
don't take holidays off.
No, ma'am. 365.
One other question just about the man. Do we know, was he from our area or no?
So I think he was a Gulf Coast native, but as far as the specifics, I couldn't provide that for you, and that'll be part of that, investigation and additional circumstance.
All right. All right. Anything else that you want to add?
No, ma'am. No, I think it's been said before, but one of those holiday miracles. So we're all incredibly thankful for the outcome.
Okay.